We had to start chapter 2, right?
Good evening, ma'am.
Number 34.
Good evening. Page number?
34, ma'am.
Hmm?
I'm 34, please.
34.
34. Yes.
34. अभी चैप्टर 1 खत्म नहीं हुआ था यहाँ पे.
No, ma'am.
ओके, अभी रैट पे एक्सपेरिमेंट चल ही रहा है.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, then start from here. You only start
Yes, ma'am.
nowadays.
Yes, ma'am. Nowadays, however, you do all of that every time. You pull onto the street with hardly any thought. The routine occurs by habit. Millions of people perform that intricate ballet every morning, unthinkingly, because as soon as we pull out the car keys, our basal ganglia kicks in, identifying the habit we have stored in our brains related to backing an automobile into the street. Once that habit starts unfolding, our gray matter is free to quiet itself, chase others' thought, which is why we have enough mental capacity to realize that Jimmy forgot his lunchbox inside. Habits, scientists say, emerge because the brain is constantly looking for way to save effort. Left to its own devices, the brain will try to make almost any routine into a habit because habits allow our mind to ramp down more often. This effort saving instinct is a huge advantage. An efficient brain requires less room, which makes for a smaller head, which makes childbirth easier and therefore causes fewer infant and mother deaths. An efficient brain also allows us to stop thinking constantly about basic behaviors such as walking and choosing what we eat, so we can devote mental energy to inventing spares, irrigating systems, and eventually airplanes and video games. But conserving mental effort is tricky because if our brains power down at the wrong moment, we might fail to notice something important, such as a predator hiding in the bushes or a speeding car as we pull onto the street. So, our basal ganglia have devised a clever system to determine when to let habits take over. It's something that happens whenever a chunk of behavior starts or ends. To see how it works, look closely at the graph of the rat's neurological habit again. Notice that brain activity spikes at the beginning of the maze when the rat hears the click before the partition starts moving, and again at the end when it finds the chocolate.
What have you understood, anyone? ये दोनों ग्राफ से क्या मैसेज लग रहा है आपको?
स्टार्टिंग में हम लोग का ब्रेन बहुत ज्यादा एक्टिव रहता है जब वो क्लिक साउंड होता है और फिर थोड़ा सा स्लो डाउन हो जाता है, फिर जैसे ही उसे चॉकलेट मिलता है तो फिर वो बहुत ज्यादा हाई हो जाता है.
हम लोगों के ब्रेन के बारे में बात हो रही है.
नो मैम,
रैट पे एक्सपेरिमेंट हो रहा है, तो यहाँ पे ऑब्वियसली एक्सपेरिमेंट किया गया. हमारे दिमाग का भी वही हाल है फिलहाल, लेकिन ये जो ग्राफ दिखाया गया ये रैट का ही है. तो पहली बार अगर टनल में डाला गया, मेज में डाला गया, तो देखा गया कि काफी ज्यादा आपका एनर्जी कंजम्पशन हो रहा था ब्रेन के थ्रू. ठीक है, बहुत ज्यादा एक्टिव था. लेकिन वही चीज बार बार करवाया गया तो ऑटोमेटिकली आपका जो ब्रेन का एफर्ट है वो डिटोरिएट कर गया या डिक्रीज कर गया. इसके अलावा आप कंपैरिजन देख रहे थे जब हम लोग गाड़ी सीखते हैं. ठीक है, मतलब जब नया नया सीखे होते हैं तो दिमाग बहुत ज्यादा हमारा कंसर्न रहता है कि आपका ठीक से ब्रेक लग रहा है कि नहीं, ठीक से एक्सीलरेटर मूव कर रहा है कि नहीं. ठीक है, रेयर वो जो मिरर है वो सब सेट करते हैं. ठीक है, टोटल टाइम एकदम रोड पे एकदम फोकस्ड रहते हैं. ठीक है, कब किधर मुड़ना है. और यही अगर हम लोग कंटिन्यूस चलाना मतलब कंटिन्यूस चलाते रहे 1 महीना 2 महीना, तो ऑटोमेटिकली आपको कभी आराम से गाना सुनते सुनते घर पहुंच जाते हैं या फिर कुछ और ही सोचते सोचते घर पहुंच जाते हैं, है ना. दिमाग काम करना या एनर्जी कंजम्पशन कम हो जाता है. ठीक है, अब तक ये हुआ है। आगे गौरव आप पढ़ लीजिए।
Those spikes are the brain's way of determining when to credit control to a habit and which habit to use from behind a partition. For instance, it's difficult for a rat to know if it's inside a familiar maze or an unfamiliar cupboard with a cat hurking outside. To deal with this uncertainty, the brain spends a lot of efforts of the beginning of a habit looking for something. A cut that offers a, a cue that offers a hint as to which pattern to use. From behind a partition, if a rat hears a click, it knows to use the maze habit. If it hears a meow, it chooses a different pattern, and at the end of the activity, when the reward appears, the brain shakes itself aware and makes sure everything unfolded as expected. This process within our brain is a three-step loop. First, there is a cue, a trigger that tells your brain to go into automatic mode and which habit to use. Then there is the routine, which can be physical or mental or emotional. Finally, there is the reward, which helps your brain figure out if this particular loop is worth remembering for the future.
अंडरस्टूड। जो क्यू है
Yes.
हमारा और जो रूटीन है, रिवॉर्ड मिला, और अगर रिवॉर्ड मिल रहा है मतलब हैप्पीनेस मिल रहा है किसी भी तरीके से वो काम करने से, तो ये लूप फॉर्म होगा, ये हैबिट लूप, यानी ये कंटिन्यूअस प्रोसेस होगा। अगर कुछ भी चीज करके अच्छा फील हो रहा है तो ठीक है, तो दैट पर्टिकुलर लूप विल बी वर्थ रिमेम्बरिंग फॉर द फ्यूचर। ठीक है, वो काम हम बार बार करेंगे।
Over time, this loop cue routine reward become more and more automatic. The cue and reward become intertwined until a powerful scene of anticipation and craving emerge. Eventually, where in a chilly MIT laboratory or your driveway, a habit is born.
ओके, यहाँ से फिर नंदिनी।
Habits are not destiny. As the next two chapters explain, habits can be ignored, changed, or replaced. But the reason the discovery of the habit loop is so important is that it reveals a basic truth. When a habit emerges, the brain stops fully participating in decision making. It stops working so hard or diverts focus to other tasks. So, unless you deliberately fight a habit, unless you find new routines, the pattern will unfold automatically. However, simply understanding how habits work, learning the structure of the habit loop, makes them easier to control. Once you break a habit into its components, you can fiddle with the gears. We have done experiments where we trained rats to run down a maze until it was a habit, and then we extinguished the habit by changing the placement of the reward. Anna, Anna Grable, a scientist at MIT who oversaw many of the Vessel Jangelia experiments, told me, then one day we will put the reward in the old place and put in the rat, and by golly, the old habit will remerge right away. Habits never really disappear. They are encoded into the structures of our brain, and that's a huge advantage for us because it would be awful if we had to relearn how to drive after every vacation. The problem is that your brain can't tell the difference between bad and good habits. And so, if you have a bad one, it's always lurking there, waiting for the right cues and rewards.
यानी जो
This
भी चीज सीखते हैं, इट रिमेन देयर इन योर ब्रेन, चाहे वो गुड है या बैड, दिस योर ब्रेन विल नॉट बी एबल टू डिफरेंशिएट। ठीक है, जो भी हैबिट आपको लग रहा है चाहे वो बैड है या गुड है, वो ऑलरेडी दिमाग में कोई चीज सीख ली है तो वो आ चुका, बस एक क्यू का वेट करेगा, क्यू जैसे नजर आया बस वो एक्टिव हो जाएगा। फाइन। यही कारण है जब आप गाड़ी वगैरह सीख लेते हैं, वही चीज दिया हुआ है कि ऐसा नहीं कि कोई वेकेशन के बाद फिर से आपको गाड़ी सीखना पड़ता है, इट रिमेन देयर जो चीज आप सीखे हुए। यस, कंटिन्यू।
This explains why it's so hard to create exercise habits. For instance, or change what we eat. Once we develop a routine of sitting on the couch rather than running or snacking whenever we pass a donut box, those patterns always remain inside our heads. By the same rule, though, if we learn to create new neurological routines that overpower those behaviors, if we take control of the habit loop, we can force those bad tendencies into the background, just like Lisa Allen did after her Caro trip. And once someone creates a new pattern, studies have demonstrated going for a jog or ignoring the donuts becomes as automatic as any other habit. Without habit loops, our brains would shut down, overwhelmed by the minutiae of daily life. People whose basal ganglia are damaged by injury or disease often become mentally paralyzed. They have trouble performing basic activities such as opening a door or deciding what to eat. They lose the ability to ignore insignificant details. One study, for example, found that patients with basal ganglia injuries couldn't recognize facial expressions, including fear and disgust, because they were perpetually uncertain about which part of the face to focus on. Without our basal ganglia, we lose access to the hundreds of habits we rely on every day. Did you pause this morning to decide whether to the your left or right so fast? Did you have trouble figuring out if you should brush your teeth before or after you showered? Of course not. Those decisions are habitual, effortless. As long as your vessel ganglia is intact and the cues remain constant, the behavior will occur unthinkingly. Though when you go on a vacation, you may get dressed in different ways or brush your teeth at a different point in your morning routine without noticing it. At the same time, however, the brain's dependence on automatic routine can be dangerous. Habits are often as much a curse as a benefit. Take Eugene, for instance. Habits gave him his life back after he lost his memory. Then they look everything away again.
ओके, आई होप यहाँ तक क्लियर है। हाँ,
Yes,
यहाँ
ma'am.
तक क्या हुआ, समझ में आया? टेल मी, एनीथिंग वाज डिफिकल्ट? समझ में आया कि नहीं आया? नहीं आया तो बताऊंगी।
मैम आ गया समझ में.
ओके, देन प्रोसीड।
As Larry,
यहाँ से अनीशा आप पढ़िए।
Yes, ma'am. As Larry Squire, the memory specialist, spent more and more time with Eugene, he came convinced his patient was somehow learning new behaviors. Images of Eugene's brain showed that his basal ganglia had escaped injury from the viral encephalitis. Was it possible? The scientist wondered that Eugene, even with severe brain damage, could still use the cue routine reward loop. Could this ancient neurological process explain how Eugene was able to walk around the block and find the jar of nuts in the kitchen? To test if Eugene was forming new habits, Squire devised an experiment. He took 16 different objects, bits of plastic, and brightly colored pieces of toys and glued them to cardboard rectangles. He then divided them into 8 pairs, choice A and choice B. In each pairing, one piece of cardboard chosen at random had a sticker placed on the bottom
दैट रीड करेक्ट, यही पढ़ रहे हैं ना?
Yes, ma'am. On the bottom that read correct. Eugene was seated at a table, given a pair of objects, and asked to choose one. Next, he was told to turn over his choice to see if there was a correct sticker underneath. This is a common way to measure memory. Since there are only 16 objects and they are always presented in the same 8 pairings, most people can memorize which item is correct after a few rounds. Monkeys can memorize all the correct items after 8 to 10 days. Eugene couldn't remember any of the correct items, no matter how many times he did the test. He repeated the experiment twice a week for months, looking at 40 pairings each day. Do you know why you were here today? A researcher asked at the beginning of one session a few weeks into the experiment. I don't think so, Eugene said. I am going to show you some objects. Do you know why? Am I supposed to describe them to you or tell you what they are used for? Eugene couldn't recollect the previous session at all. But as the weeks passed, Eugene's performance improved. After 28 days of training, Eugene was choosing the correct object 85% of the time. At 36 days, he was right 95% of the time. After one test, Eugene looked at the researcher, bewildered by his success. How am I doing this? He asked her. Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, you are not audible.
I'm not audible. Now?
Yes, ma'am. Now.
आवाज कट
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. वही डिस्कशन कर रही थी कि यहाँ तक क्या समझ में आया.
यस मैम, यहाँ पे एक वो लोग गेम प्लान कर रहे हैं जिससे पता चले कि यूजिन का ब्रेन कैसे काम कर रहा है, उनका हैबिट जो है वो उनको याद रह रहा है या नहीं रह रहा है. तो उसमें एक टॉयज, कलरफुल टॉयज को लेते हैं, वो लोग कार्डबोर्ड पर स्टिक करते हैं, उसका पेयरिंग करते हैं. उसके बाद ये टेस्ट होता है कि कितने डेज में उनको कितना बात याद रह रहा है और नहीं रह रहा है. धीरे धीरे उनके में इम्प्रूवमेंट दिखाई दे रहा है.
तो अपने सक्सेस को देख करके वो खुश होकर के पूछ रहे हैं कि हम कैसे कर पा रहे हैं ये चीज. Why am I doing this? Okay, सही है, चलिए आगे बढ़िए.
How am I doing this? He asked her. Tell me what is going on in your head, the researcher said. Do you say to yourself, I remember seeing that one? No, Eugene said. It's here somehow or another. He pointed to his head and the hand goes for it. To Squire, however, it made perfect sense. Eugene was exposed to a cue, a pair of objects always presented in the same combination. There was a routine. He would choose one object and look to see if there was a sticker underneath. Even if he had no idea why he felt compelled to turn the cardboard over. Then there was a reward, the satisfaction he received after finding a sticker proclaiming correct. Eventually, a habit loop emerged. To make sure this pattern was, in fact, a habit, Square conducted one more experiment. He took all 16 items and put them in front of Eugene at the same time. He asked him to pull all the correct objects into one pile. Eugene had no idea where to begin. Gosh sakes, how to remember this? He asked. He reached for one object and he started to turn it over. The experimenter stopped him. No, she explained. The task was to put the items in piles. Why was he trying to turn them over? That's just a habit, I think, he said. He couldn't do it. The objects were presented outside of the context of the habit loop, made no sense to him. Here was the proof Squire was looking for. The experiments demonstrated that Eugene had the ability to form new habits even when they involved tasks or objects he couldn't remember for more than few seconds. This explained how Eugene managed to go for a walk every morning. The cues, certain trees on corners, or the placement of particular mailbox were consistent every time he went outside. So though he couldn't recognize his house, his habits always guided him back to his front door. It also explained why Eugene would eat breakfast 3 or 4 times a day, even if he wasn't hungry. As long as the right cues were present, such as his radio or the morning light through his windows, he automatically followed the script dictated by his basal ganglia. What's more, there was dozens of other habits in Eugene's life that no one noticed until they started looking for them. Eugene's daughter, for instance, would often stop by his house to say hello. She would talk to her father in the living room for a bit, then go into the kitchen to visit with her mother and then leave, waving goodbye on her way out the door. Eugene, who had forgotten their earlier conversation by the time she left, would get angry. Why was she leaving without chatting? And then forget why he was upset. But the emotional habit had already started, and so his anger would persist, red hot and beyond his understanding until it burnt itself out.
Okay, from here, Pratyay.
मैम इसमें एक पॉइंट था मैम, डिक्टेटेड बाय बिस्कल गंगालिया.
हाँ, कहाँ पे?
उसको मैम इसके जस्ट ऊपर वाले पैराग्राफ में मैम था, डिक्टेटेड बाय बिस्कल गंगालिया.
He automatically followed the script dictated by his basal ganglia. हाँ, तो इसका क्या करना है?
मैम ये जो एज लॉन्ग एज था मैम, क्योंकि मैम समझते जाना था यहाँ पे मैम, बढ़ गया वही मैम, स्क्रीनशॉट लेना.
क्या क्या? basal ganglia से पहले आप क्या समझ रहे हैं? What have you understood from this basal ganglia? What is this? है क्या ये?
यही तो पूछना था मैम.
ये पहले ऑलरेडी डिस्कशन हो चुका है. ब्रेन का वो पार्ट जो याद रखता है आपका डेली रूटीन, डेली आदत जो भी आप करते हैं. तो बेसल गैंग्लिया ब्रेन का वो पार्ट है, ठीक है, जो डेली एक्टिविटी को याद रखता है. ठीक है, जिस आदमी से आप रोज मिलते हैं उसका आप चेहरा याद रखते हैं, वो सब बिकॉज ऑफ दिस पार्ट ऑफ द ब्रेन ओनली. ठीक है, क्लासमेट लोग को आप ऑब्वियसली पहचान लेते हैं ना, बचपन के सारे फ्रेंड को कभी 10 साल के बाद भी आप मिलेंगे, पहचान लेंगे ना. यस, बिकॉज ऑफ दिस पार्ट ऑफ द ब्रेन ओनली. तो बेसल गैंग्लिया इज रिस्पॉन्सिबल फॉर दीज थिंग्स.
यस मैम, हो गया.
बेसल गैंग्लिया तो कई बार डिस्कशन हो चुका है, मुझे लगा पता ही होगा आप लोगों को, है ना. ये तो कहाँ रैट का जो एक्सपेरिमेंट शुरू हुआ है तभी से बेसल गैंग्लिया पढ़ रहे हैं आप लोग. खैर, यहाँ से शुरू
मैम
करिए.
लिखे नहीं थे, अभी लिख रहे हैं.
अभी भी आप लिख कहाँ रहे हैं? आप फोकस्ड हैं कहाँ? आप तो इधर उधर बात कर रहे हैं.
Sometimes he would bang the table or curse, and if you asked him why, he says, "I don't know, but I am mad." The worldly told me. He would kick his chair or snap whoever come into his room. Then a few minutes later, he would smile and talk about the weather. It was like once it started, he had to finish the frustration. She said. A Square new experiment also showed something else, that the habits are surprisingly
स्क्वायर
delicate.
कौन है प्रत्यय?
I'm right.
शाबाश. स्क्वायर रैट है क्या?
नो मैम.
कौन है?
मैम जो यूजीन के ब्रेन पे एक्सपेरिमेंट करे थे, लेडी.
अब लेडी है ये चीज तो डिस्कशन नहीं किया गया, लेकिन हाँ प्रोफेसर हैं जो यूजीन को चेक कर रहे हैं, उनका इलाज कर रहे हैं, उनके ऊपर रिसर्च कर रहे हैं, उसके दिमाग के ऊपर. ठीक है प्रत्यय, देखिए कितना फोकस्ड है आप. आगे बढ़िए.
Okay, so a Square new experiment also showed something else, that the habits are surprisingly delicate. If using cues changed the slightest bit, his habits fell apart. The few times he walked around the block, for instance, and something was different, the city was doing street repairs or windstorm had blown branches all over the sidewalk. Eugene told had branches all over the sidewalk. Eugene would get lost, no matter how close he was to home, until a kind neighbor showed him the way to his door. If his daughter stopped to chat with him for 10 seconds before she walked out, his anger habit never emerged. Square's experiment with using revolutionized the scientific community, understanding how the brain works by proving once and more for all that it's possible to learn and make a unconscious choice without remembering anything about the lesson or decision making. Eugene showed that habits, as much as memory and reason, are at the root of how we behave. We meet how we behave. We might not remember the experience that create our habits, but once they are lodged within our brains, they influence how we act, often without our.
फाइन, यहाँ से
Since
क्लियर पढ़िए।
since
यहाँ से
Square
पहले
first
क्लियर हुआ कि नहीं? प्रतिया पूछिए। क्या हो गया? डाउट क्लियर? हाँ,
हम नहीं समझे, मतलब समझना पड़ेगा उसको।
अभी तक हम लोगों ने देखा यूजीन के बारे में, यहाँ डिस्कशन हुआ कि कैसे वो आराम से घर आ गया था, बार बार कंटिन्यूअसली बाहर ले जाया जाता था घूमने के लिए, लेकिन फिर वही उसी सेम ब्लॉक के बारे में ये बात हो रही है कि एक बार वही सेम ब्लॉक जहाँ पे वो डेली वॉक करने के लिए जाता था, वहां पे विंड स्टॉर्म की वजह से वो रिपेयरिंग का काम चल रहा था, तो ऑब्वियसली नक्शा चेंज हो गया था, जिसकी वजह से यूजीन वापस घर नहीं आ पाया। ठीक है, तो यही यही चीज डिस्कशन हो रहा है यहाँ पे। अब नेक्स्ट पढ़िए कोमल।
Yes, ma'am. Since Square's first paper on Eugene's habit was published, the science of habit formation has exploded into a major field of study. Researchers at Duke, Harvard, UCLA, Yale, USC, Princeton, the University of Pennsylvania, and at schools in the United Kingdom, Germany, and the Netherlands, as well as corporate scientists working for Procter Gamble, Microsoft, Google, and hundreds of other companies are focused on understanding the neurology and the psychology of habits, their strengths and weaknesses, and why they emerge and how they can be changed. Researchers have learned that cues can be almost anything from a visual trigger, such a candy bar or a television commercial, to a certain place, a time, a day, an emotion, a sequence of thoughts, or the company of particular people. Routines can be incredible, complex, or fantastically simple. Some habits, such as those related to emotions, are measured in milliseconds. Rewards can range from food or drugs that cause physical sensation to emotional payoffs, such as the feelings of pride that accompany praise or self congratulation. And in almost every experiment, researchers have seen echoes of Square's discoveries with Eugene. Habits are powerful but delicate. They can emerge outside our consciousness or can be deliberately designed. They often occur without our permission but can be reshaped by fiddling with their parts. They shape our lives far more than we realize. They are so strong, in fact, that they cause our brains to cling to them at the exclusive of all else, including common sense. In one set of experiments, for example, researchers affiliated with the National Institute on Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism trained mice to press levers in response to certain cues until the behavior became a habit. The mice were always rewarded with food. Then the scientists poisoned the food so that it made the animals violently ill, or electrified the floor so that when the mice walked toward their reward, they received a shock. The mice knew the food and cage were dangerous. When they were offered the poisoned pellets in a bowl or saw the electrified floor panels, they stayed away. When they saw their old cues, however, they unthinkingly pressed the lever and ate the food, or they walked across the floor even as they vomited or jumped from the electricity. The habit was so ingrained the mice could not stop themselves. It's not hard to find an analog in a human world. Consider fast food, for instance. It makes sense when the kids are starving and you are driving home after a long day to stop just this once at McDonald's or Burger King. The meals are inexpensive. It tastes so good. After all, one dose of processed meat, salty fries, and sugar soda poses a relatively small health risk, right? It's not like you do it all the time, but habit emerge without our permission. Studies indicate that families usually don't intend to eat fast food on a regular basis. What happens is that a once a month pattern slowly becomes once a week and then twice a week, as the cues and rewards create a habit until the kids are consuming an unhealthy amount of hamburgers and fries. When researchers at the University of North Texas and Yale tried to understand why families gradually increase their fast food consumption, they found a series of cues and rewards that most customers never knew were influencing their behaviors. They discovered the habit loop. Every McDonald's, for instance, looks the same. The company deliberately tries to standardize the store's architecture and what employees say to customers. So everything is a consistent cue to trigger eating routines. The food at some chains are specifically engineered to deliver immediate rewards. The fries, for instance, are designed to be disintegrating the moment they hit your tongue in order to deliver a hit of salt and grease as fast as possible, causing your pleasure centers to light up and your brain to lock in the pattern. All the better for tightening the habit loop. However, even these habits are delicate. When a fast food restaurant closes down, the families that previously ate there will often start having dinner at home rather than seek out an alternative location. Even small shift can end the pattern, but since we often don't recognize these habit loops as they grow, we are blind to our ability to control them. By learning to observe the cues and rewards through, we can change the routines.
ओके, यहाँ तक क्लियर हुआ? यहाँ तक क्या डिस्कशन हुआ? कोमल,
Yes, ma'am.
यहाँ तक क्या समझे? कोई वर्ड डिफिकल्ट तो नहीं था? बताइए अनीशा।
Yes, ma'am.
बताइए।
Ma'am, उतना clear समझ नहीं आया.
समझ आता अगर यहाँ फोकस होता। नॉर्मल सा रेस्टोरेंट के बारे में बात हो रही है यहाँ पे कि कहीं भी मैकडोनल्ड या कहीं भी हम लोग जाते हैं, कभी ऐसा सोचा है कि एक दिन खाने जाते हैं, फिर सप्ते में वो 2 दिन खाने लगते हैं और धीरे धीरे लत लग जाती है। तो आखिर क्या किया जाता है वहाँ पे कि ये जो सॉल्टी टेस्ट जो आपको लगता है, और
आवाज क्लियर नहीं आ रहा।
हेलो मैम।
आवाज क्लियर नहीं आ रही है?
नो मैम, ब्रेक हो रहा है।
Yes, ma'am.
अब क्लियर था मैम?
अभी ठीक है?
यस मैम।
Yes, ma'am.
तो ये मैं बता रही थी कि यहाँ पे ये हो रहा है, जैसे जो फास्ट फूड हम लोग खाते हैं वो कई बार देखते होंगे कि हम लोग एक बार खाने के लिए जाते हैं, फिर जब भी क्रॉस करेंगे दोबारा मन करेगा खाने का। कहाँ हम कभी खाए थे महीने में एक बार, और फिर ग्रेजुअली हो जाता है सप्ताह में 2 बार। रियलाइज किए कभी कैसे लत लग जाती है? तो ये सारा जो रेस्टोरेंट है वो टेक्निक यूज करते हैं। लाइक आप कभी ये सब खाएंगे तो काफी सॉल्टी रहता है, ठीक है, जो हमारे टंग पे इफेक्ट करता है, जिसकी वजह से और भी टेस्ट के बारे में यहाँ पे डिस्क्रिप्शन दिया हुआ है। वो इतने ये सारा इसलिए किया जाता है ताकि वो टाइटन कर पाए आपकी हैबिट लूप को, आपको एक तरीके से लत लग जाए उन चीजों का। ठीक है, ये चीज है। अब यहाँ है यूजीन केलनेस के बारे में। सागर, एक मिनट चेक कर लूं कितना बड़ा है। ये आज चैप्टर 1 खत्म हो जाएगा, फटाफट खत्म कर लीजिए, थोड़ा फास्ट।
Yes, ma'am. By 2000, 7 years after Eugene's illness, his life had achieved a kind of equilibrium. He went for a walk every morning. He ate what he wanted, sometimes 5 or 6 times a day. His wife knew that as long as the television was tuned to the History Channel, Eugene would settle into the plus chair and what is regardless of whether it was airing re- reruns or new programs. He could not tell the difference. As he
तो
got
7 साल
older,
बाद आफ्टर यूजीन इलनेस बाय 2000, यूजीन इलनेस के 7 साल हो चुके थे। यहाँ पे उनके बारे में ये बताया जा रहा था कि वो हमेशा की तरह हिस्ट्री चैनल जब तक ट्यून रहेगा तब तक वो उसी तरीके से सोफा पे या चेयर पे वो बैठा रहेगा और उसको कोई डिफरेंस समझ में नहीं आता है कि यार ये रीरन मतलब क्या हुआ, वही पुराना प्रोग्राम चल रहा है या फिर नया प्रोग्राम चल रहा है। चूंकि मेमोरी लॉस का प्रॉब्लम था तो उसको डिफरेंशिएट नहीं कर पाता था कि न्यू प्रोग्राम है, ऑब्वियसली उसके लिए सारा नया ही लगता था, जिसकी वजह से वो अब कभी भी बोर नहीं होता था। ठीक है, प्रोसीड।
yes, ma'am. As he got older, however, Eugene's habits started impacting his life in negative way. He was sedi- sedentary, sometimes watching television for hours at a time because he never grew bored with the shows. His physicians became worried about his heart. The doctors told Beverly to keep him on a strict diet of healthy food. She tried, but it was difficult to influence how frequently he ate or what he consumed. He never recalled her admonitions. Even the refrigerator was soaked with fruits and vegetables. Eugene would root around until he found the bacons and eggs. That was his routine. And as Eugene's aged and his bones became more brittle, the doctor said he needed to be more careful walking around. In his mind, however, Eugene was 20 years younger. He never remembered to step carefully. All my life was fascinated by memories, Esquire told me. Then I then I met Epi and saw how rich life can be, even if you cannot be remember it. The brain has this amazing ability to find happiness even when the memories of it are gone. It's hard to turn that off, though, which ultimately works against him. Waverly tried to use her understanding of habits to help Eugene's avoid problems as he aged. She discovered that she could short circuit some of his worst pattern by intersecting new cues. If she didn't keep bacons in the fridge, Eugene would not eat multiple unhealthy breakfasts. When she put a salad next to his chair, he would sometimes pick at it, and the meal becomes a habit. He stopped searching the kitchen for treat. His diet gradually improved.
ओके, तो यहाँ
Despite
पे बेकन, डॉक्टर्स का क्या कहना था कि अभी बेकन और एग हमेशा खाता होता था, टीवी देखता होता था, उसका हेल्थ का इशू आ रहा था, तो डॉक्टर वार्न कर रहे थे कि उसको खाने पीने पे हेल्दी डाइट पे थोड़ा ज्यादा ध्यान देना पड़ेगा। ठीक है, लेकिन जब तक बेकन नहीं मिलता था वो सेटिस्फाइड नहीं फील करता था, तो बेवर्ली ने क्या किया कि चेयर पे ही सैलेड वगैरह रख दी। ठीक है, कि जब भी उसको भूख लगती थी वो कब मतलब अनकॉन्शियस माइंड से ही लेकिन उठा के खाता था वो। ठीक है, जिसकी वजह से क्या हुआ, उसका डाइट ग्रेजुअली इम्प्रूव किया। फाइन, आगे बढ़िए।
yes, ma'am. Despite this effort, however, Eugene's health still declined. One spring day, Eugene was watching television when he suddenly scouted. Beverly ran in and saw him clutching his chest. He called an ambulance. At the hospital, they diagnosed a mirror attack. By then, the pain had passed, and Eugene was fighting to get off his journey. That night, he kept pulling off the monitors attached to his chest so he could roll over and sleep. Alarm would bray and nurses would rush in. They tried to get him to quit feeding with the sensors by tapping the lead in place and telling him they would use restraint if he continues fusing. Nothing worked. He forgot the threat as soon as they were issued. Then his daughter told a nurse to try complimenting him on his willingness to sit still and to repeat his accomplishment over and over. Each time he saw him, he wanted to, get his pride involved. His daughter, Carl Reyes, told me, we had say, "Oh, Dad, you are really doing something important for science by keeping these doodles in place." The nurses started to dote on him. He loved it. After a couple of days, he did whatever they asked. Eugene returned home a week later. Then, in the fall of 2008, while walking through his living room, Eugene stepped on a ledge near the fireplace, fell and broke his hip. At the hospital, Squires and his team worried that he would have panic attack because he would not know where he was. So they left notes by his besides explaining what had happening and posted photos of his children on the walls. His wife and kids came in every day. Eugene, however, never grew worried. He never asked why he was in the hospital. He seemed at peace with all the uncertainty by that point, said Esquire. It had been 15 years since he had lost his memory. It was as, it was as if part of his brain knew there were some things he would never understand and was okay with that. Waverly came to the hospital every day. I spent a long time talking to him, she said. I told him that I loved him and about our kids and what a good life we had. I pointed to the pictures and talked about how much he was adored. We were married for 57th year and of 42 of those were a real normal marriage. Sometimes it was hard because I want my old husband back so much. But at least I knew he was happy. A few weeks later, his daughter came to visit. What is the panic? Eugene asked when she arrived. She took him outside in the wheelchair on the hospital lawn. It was a beautiful day, Eugene said. Pretty nice weather. She told him about her kids and they played with her dog. She though he might be able to come home soon. The sun was going down. She started to get ready to take him inside. Eugene looked at her. I'm lucky to have a daughter like you, he said. She was caught off guard. She could not remember the last time he had he had said something too sweet. I'm lucky that you are my dad, she told him. Gosh, it was a beautiful day, he said. What do you think about the weather? That night at
यहाँ पे
1
ये
o'clock
बताया
in the
जा रहा है,
morning, Beverly's
एक मिनट,
phone
यहाँ पे ये
rang. The
बेसिकली
doctor said
Can you hear me? Getting my voice?
Yes, ma'am.
ठीक है।
Yes, ma'am.
यहाँ पे ये देख रहे हैं हम लोग, यूजिन के बारे में डिस्कशन हुआ कि हाँ फिर डाइट वगैरह इम्प्रूव होने के बाद भी उसको प्रॉब्लम हुआ, हॉस्पिटल में भर्ती करना पड़ा, लेकिन फिर सब लोग ये सजेस्ट कर रहे थे कि आप उसको कॉम्प्लीमेंट दीजिए, उसको अच्छा फील कराइए। तो यहाँ पे आप देख रहे हैं कि वो भी बोल रहा है आई एम लकी टू हैव अ डॉटर लाइक यू, डॉटर भी बोल रही है आई एम लकी दैट यू आर माय डैड। लेकिन फिर से वही, चूंकि यूजिन को कुछ याद नहीं आता तो फिर से वही गॉश इट्स अ ब्यूटीफुल डे, क्योंकि ही हैव स्टार्टेड फ्रॉम दैट ओनली। ठीक है, ब्यूटीफुल डे वो पहले भी शुरू किया था, यहाँ भी ब्यूटीफुल डे, क्योंकि उसको कुछ याद नहीं है। फिर एक रात, मैं फटाफट कंप्लीट कर दूं इसको, एक रात फोन बजा आपका, दैट नाइट, उसी रात की बात हो रही है कि 1 बजे फोन आया बेवर्ली को कि अब यूजिन नहीं है, मैसिव हार्ट अटैक से उसका डेथ हो चुका है, बट स्टिल उसका जो रिसर्च की वजह से वो साइंस के लिए बहुत बड़ा कंट्रीब्यूशन करके गया है। ठीक है, इतना ये है चैप्टर 1 खत्म। अब चैप्टर 2 आपका क्रेविंग ब्रेन, वो होगा नेक्स्ट क्लास से। ठीक है, और जब हम लोग रीड कर रहा है कोई, तो बहुत मैं देख रही हूँ लोग बात कर रहे हैं, क्यों? फोकस यही रहना चाहिए ना, जब आप 1 घंटा दे रहे हैं तो 1 घंटा अच्छे से डिवोट करिए। ओके, रोल 1।
Ma'am, on
Ma'am,
Tuesday.
29.
KSB.
हाँ, ओके, रोल 1 2
Yes, ma'am. Roll number 2.
मैम
4
3 प्रेजेंट मैम।
5,
मैम रोल नंबर 4 यस मैम 5
बोलते जाइए मैं सुन रही हूँ, 7 8
Present, ma'am.
8 9 10
Present, ma'am.
11 12 13 14 15 16 17 18
Present, ma'am. 18.
19 20 21 22 23 24 25
Present, ma'am. 25.
26 27 28 29 30
29, ma'am.
30 31 32 33 34 35 36 37 38 39
Present,
40
ma'am. 38.
39 40 41 42 43 44 45
Yes, ma'am. 44. Ma'am, roll number 44 present.
okay 46 47 48 49
49, ma'am.
48%.
Present, ma'am. 49.
50 51 52
52 present, ma'am.
53 54 55 56 57 58 59
Present, ma'am. 58.
60 61 62 63 64
64 present, ma'am.
65 66 67
67 present, ma'am.
68 69 70 71, 72, 73,
71.
73, 74, 75, 76, 77, 78,
77.
79, 80, 81, 82, 83, 84,
82 present, ma'am.
85, 86, 87, 86 तक.
Present ma'am 86. Ma'am 86.
Okay.
Ma'am 32.
32. सूरज. ठीक है.
Ma'am, roll 40 present.
Okay, I'll check. Thank you.